If you're in a place where it is appropriate and comfortable for you to do so, close your eyes and begin to take some long, slow, deep, relaxing breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. With every inhale, feel more peace and light entering your body and mind, and with every exhale, feel like you are letting go of all tension and anything you do not want. Breathing in light and peace, and letting go of tension on every exhale. We picture ourselves on top of a beautiful mountain in the center of a circular grove of trees. In the center of our circle, a bonfire blazes forth, lighting us and the grove up with a sacred golden light. We recognize that this is the light of perfect love and perfect trust, and it burns away everything that is not like itself. Into this sacred space, we invite the presence of our Creator. To many of us, our Creator reveals themselves to be a God and Goddess, a mother and father. Into this sacred space, we also invite the presence of our teachers, our angels, our guides. We ask that they join with us as we dedicate this space to each other and to them, that we be guided and led as we walk upon the way, becoming happier, more peaceful, more gentle, more prosperous, more healthy, and more loving people. Thank you very much, and if it's appropriate for you to do so out loud, you can join me in saying, "Blessed be." We had a great question on the Discord server. It was about innocence. I think it was in response to a psalm spell, and this person had some really great questions. They said, I ended up listening to this and it gave me a lot of questions. If wrongdoing is illusory and we're all innocent, doesn't that assume that it kind of excuses it? Couldn't someone with little scruples use this as an excuse to ignore their own bad behavior? Like how some Christians use the saved thing as an excuse to do bad things. It also feels counter to my every instinct as someone who has done wrong in the past. Saying I'm innocent feels just like I'm insulting the person I hurt with this. I ask this because I might otherwise try this, but it gives me pause. It's such a great question, and I really, really appreciate it. Guilt and accountability are very important things for us to talk about. When we wrong someone, when we do something to wrong another person, we are in effect wronging ourselves. There is nothing you can do to another that you don't do to yourself. That's the most important thing to understand. There is no us and them. There is no place where I stop and you start. So even though in this world, which is an illusory world, where it looks like everything is very separated, and we believe that minds are separated, everything's separated. It looks like I can do something to you and be safe. But in reality, I can't do anything to you without doing it to myself. And just because I can also use the illusory nature of time to make it look like I'm delaying the effect of my wrongdoing, or that I'm somehow escaping accountability for what I'm doing, it can seem that way. That's impossible. So there is absolutely nothing that I can do to another person that I'm not ultimately doing to myself. And that is sometimes called karma or the law of comeback. But it's not that it's coming back because it didn't go anywhere to begin with. Where would it go? There is no place for a thought to go other than its source. And that's us. And in reality, all minds are joined except for at the level of the ego, which believes that we are alone and vulnerable in the world. This is how it works. The ego mind is an idea. It's not an entity. A lot of times people conflate the ego with like Satan or something like that. It's not an entity. In reality, it's much more dangerous than if it were. Because where the ego exists is within the place where we have creative power. So the ego mind is a belief in separation. It's a belief in aloneness. It's a belief in a lack of safety. And it's a belief in guilt. It's a belief in a lot of those ideas which are counter to the truth. The ego uses the power of creativity to create an illusion. And why that is because it's creating things that infinite intelligence didn't create and doesn't create. When we are believing that we are separate, distinct, all by ourselves, we're also believing that we're vulnerable and unsafe. In order to protect ourselves and to get our needs met, we have convinced ourselves the only way to do that is to either be a victim or a perpetrator. There's nothing else. There's either a victim or a perpetrator, and we usually flip-flop back and forth between the two. They're both two sides of the same error. Now, that's not to blame a victim, and that's not even to say that there aren't victims in this world. It's understanding where the origin of all of this illusion in this world comes from. The origin is in that insane idea that we are separate from our source. We started out when we built the ego feeling guilty. And this guilt is this idea that in separating ourselves from God, somehow we've killed God. We've killed our father and slept with our mother. It's the Oedipus. That's what that Oedipus complex is referring to, is the birth of the ego. And so guilt is the beginning of this world. Love does not make this world go round. Guilt makes this world go round. Guilt is a given. You feel guilty in this world just by who you are in this world, and that is a false self. Guilt is something that is intolerable to us. So what do we do with that guilt? We throw it onto other people. We project it outward. That's the only way that we know how to take care of the guilt, is by throwing it out there onto other people. Somehow we think that that's going to get rid of the guilt, when in reality, it reinforces the guilt, because like I said, you can't do anything to another person that you're not doing to yourself. So in blaming other people, we are in effect blaming ourselves, which is reinforcing the guilt. And this is all happening very often on a very subliminal level, because obviously if we were to notice ourselves doing that, we might say, maybe that's not such a good idea. So that's how the ego operates, is subliminally, and through this constant projecting onto other people the qualities that we find intolerable. And the main one of those is guilt. This whole world is based on harming each other, feeling guilty about it, and then projecting that guilt onto others. And it just goes on again and again and again. And that's just what this whole world is. And you can see it. It's a blame game. This whole world is the blame game. And if you're not blaming another, then you're feeling guilty for yourself. You're either feeling victimized or feeling like a guilty perpetrator. And there's really no escape. There's really no rest from that. I understand what you're saying, that if I were to look at the truth of who I am and say, wait a minute, I'm not guilty, I'm innocent. They're not guilty, they're innocent. The fear isn't that sort of just excusing bad behavior and allowing it to go on without any accountability? Well, first and foremost, that's not possible. It's not possible to harm another person without harming yourself. So the accountability is kind of locked into the whole thing. So we don't have to worry about that. When you feel guilty, punishment is on its way. That's just how it works. Guilt demands punishment. And so if you're feeling guilty for something, accountability is definitely right around the corner. There's no escape from it, whether or not you're the victim or the perpetrator. You're in for more and more pain. It's just how it is. This world is just going to be like that forever and ever and ever. What do we do about that? We realize first and foremost that the illusion of the guilt and the blame and the guilt and the blame and that cycle that really is the wheel around which this world turns wasn't created by infinite intelligence. It was created by us. And that's why I call it an illusion, or why I call it a nightmare, or why I call it a dream, because it's how we use our own creative minds against ourselves and against each other. The way to escape that illusion, to wake up from that dream, is to deny it, is to deny that ultimately that anybody's guilty. Now, that's something that people don't want to hear because, like you said in your post there, that all that does is excuse bad behavior and keep things from ever getting better. But actually, that's the opposite of the truth. You can see that nothing's getting better, staying on course with blame and guilt and blame and guilt and blame and guilt. That's not making anything any better. So the only way to wake up out of the dream is to wake up to reality. And the reality is infinite intelligence doesn't hold anything against anybody. And since infinite intelligence already thinks you're innocent and already thinks everybody else is innocent, agreeing with infinite intelligence instead of with your ego is not going to make things worse. It's going to make things better. Because ultimately, and people really don't want to hear this, ultimately nobody wants to hurt anybody. Ultimately, nobody wants to hurt anybody. Egos want to hurt one another, but that's because egos are sick. Egos are an illness. This idea that I'm alone and I'm separate and I'm at war with the world, that's a sickness. This is a sickness of our minds. It's a fragmented mind. It's called dissociation. Everything is fragmented. We live in a split mind. We don't live in a whole, unified, healthy mind. We live in a very split mind at war with itself. When we come to the realization that on the other side of that disease, everybody's innocent and nobody wants to harm anybody. Nobody wants to. They just don't know any other way to get their needs met. And it's very easy to say, well, yeah, but they're just evil. They're just evil. That's the only reason why they do this, is they're evil and they deserve to be destroyed. They deserve eternal damnation in hell. That's just how it works. And even if you don't use those words, you see it all the time. There's no grace, there's no forgiveness available to certain people because of what they did. The problem with that kind of thought is that's what you're condemning yourself to, because there's no separation, ultimately. There's no place where you stop and they start. So to say, yeah, their behavior is so heinous that they can't be forgiven, and until accountability is at its extreme, I'm not even going to entertain the idea that they've got innocence, that they were just trying to get their needs met and they didn't know how else to do it. But see, as you hang on to that blame of them, you're hanging on to your own guilt also. For every moment that you are unwilling to let go of your blame of that person, you are unwilling to be innocent yourself. A jailer is just as stuck as the prisoner whom they're guarding. So if you're their jailer, you get to sit there with them and be in prison together until you decide, well, maybe we can let you go. Right? You're their jailer. You see this a lot in witches. Witches who are always eschewing these Christian doctrines and very loud and proud. They're the ones that want to condemn people to hell more than anybody else. They say that they don't believe in the concept of sin, but they do. If you listen to just how vehemently they condemn others for their behavior. If you think in terms of the old witch burnings, the idea was that just because you're a witch, or because we say you're a witch, you deserve to be burned alive at the stake. That's what you deserve. And somehow we're going to purify the world of evil by burning the witches at the stake. Well, nowadays, when people reclaim the craft as their own, reclaim the word witch, and they say things like burning times no more, and we're never going to be persecuted again. Yet those are the same people that are, at least metaphorically, tying other people to the stake and lighting the match. And the issue is, when we burn another person at the stake, under whose feet are we lighting the match? Ours. We're lighting the match under our own feet when we light the match under others' feet. There's no way around it. Now, of course, we're not saying that when somebody wrongs another person that there shouldn't be accountability. Of course there should be accountability. But having accountability does not preclude having compassion. So I think a lot of people get very childish about this. And they say, well, you can't forgive people. You can't let them off the hook. You can't see them as innocent because then they're just going to keep doing it again and again and again. That's not enlightened rehabilitative behavior, because our prison system is based purely on punishment, not on rehabilitation, because we've come to this decision that certain crimes can't be rehabilitated. But if that's true for certain criminals, then that's true for everybody. It's just how the ego works. It'll play lip service to the idea of rehabilitation. It'll play lip service to the idea of forgiveness. But in reality, it's saying, no, I can't forgive, because if I forgive, I'm making myself vulnerable, because then they can do it to me again. If I let somebody off the hook, if I see them as innocent, all I'm doing is giving them more fuel and power to hurt me even more. That's what we believe. Now look and see, though, if somebody does do a heinous crime, they are guilty, and they do need to be removed from society to protect themselves and to protect others. We're actually protecting them by removing them from the ability to keep creating that crime again, to committing that crime again. It's helping them as well as helping society. But if all we do is punish them for it, then all we're doing is reinforcing the bad behavior, so that if they do get released, that it's going to be even worse than it was before. And if we never release them, all they get is a life of punishment. And if there is such a thing as reincarnation, they'll come back and try it again. Whereas if we are able to see accountability, if you will, as being acts of compassion, where what we're doing is removing them from the ability to cause this harm again, while at the same time recognizing that ultimately they're innocent, but they have an illness and they need to be treated. They need to be treated. Then we're showing ourselves the same compassion, because maybe you don't murder people, maybe you don't rape people, maybe you don't steal from people, but you do other things that you feel guilty about. You're not perfect, right? So it's easy for us to just get really obsessed with these criminal kind of ideas as seeing, well, what about this? What about that? What about this? What about that? It's a way of just completely dissociating from what we do about our own guilt feelings. Our own guilt feelings, the only way we know how to handle them is by throwing them onto other people and blaming them. It's the only way we know how to handle it. You're either going around feeling guilty all the time, or you're going around blaming people all the time, until you actually can look at your own guilt feelings and handle them and actually release them and actually overcome them. And the only way that we can overcome our own guilt feelings is by accepting the fact that we made them up. We made them up, and we don't have the power to unmake them, because we are so good at what we do. Because again, we are creators, we are co-creators with infinite intelligence, the creative source of the entire universe that has the ability to create babies out of embryos and planets revolving around a sun and photosynthesis and all of these miracles. You're a part of that, and you have the same creative powers as that infinite intelligence does. If you're moving through life from a perspective of I'm guilty, I'm guilty, I'm guilty, then you're creating your world based on I'm guilty, I'm guilty, I'm guilty. Now, a lot of us can't stand the idea of I'm guilty, I'm guilty, I'm guilty. Therefore, we live our lives more in the realm of they're guilty, they're guilty, they're guilty. But it doesn't matter, because then we just live in a world of guilt. And the only way, again, that out of that is by recognizing that since we're so creative, that when we miscreate with no exit. We are so good at miscreating, there's no way out. We've covered all bases. And the only way out for us is to look outside the thought system which created this world in the first place. And that is infinite intelligence itself. And infinite intelligence knows the truth. And that is that we are asleep, safe and innocent right now, never sinned, never made a mistake, never did anything wrong except for had a dream, had a bad dream. And so you can't imagine even a human mother beating up a child for having a nightmare. I mean, maybe there's some sick mom out there that would do that, but most mothers wouldn't do that. The kid's having a nightmare and her response to that is banging its head against the wall. No, it's probably not going to happen. So if that's not the case with a human mother, how would it be the case with infinite intelligence? That because we're having a nightmare, that we're going to be punished right? So that's not really what's happening. What's really happening is infinite intelligence is waiting for us to gently awaken from our nightmare to the remembrance that we are innocent. And since we are innocent, everybody's innocent. Now, within the realm of this nightmare, yes, there is a history of bad behavior on our part and on the part of other people. And you can tally that up for eternity and come up with who needs to be punished and how much they need to be punished and why they need to be punished and what they did. And you can do that for yourself as well. You can tally up all of the reasons why you didn't make the grade, or you maybe went against another person, or you did something wrong. But in reality, isn't it true that if you had known how to do better at the time, that you would have? You just didn't know any other way to get your needs met? That you were so sick at that time that that was the best you could come up with? And sickness is not a sin? Well, then that's the case for everybody else. Everybody else that has wronged anybody else was coming from a place of sickness. Even the really bad ones, so-called really bad ones. Even Hitler was sick. Now, I'm not excusing the behavior. I'm not saying that it's okay. Let's just forgive and forget and all is well. No. In this world, we have accountability. We have, like I said, we have ways of dealing with that. We have excusing the behavior. I'm not saying that it's okay. Let's just forgive and forget and all is well. No. In this world, we have accountability. We have, like I said, we have ways of then those systems can start working at a more rehabilitative level than what they're working at now. But I'm just talking about ultimately in your heart, that if you can see yourself and other people as the innocent child of the universe that they are, then instead of punitively working throughout your life, you are starting to lovingly work throughout your life. And that even in the cases of where there needs to be accountability, you're coming from a place of love and compassion rather than a place of attack and retribution. It's not that you're going to be more vulnerable when you see yourself and other people as innocent. It's that you're going to be less vulnerable, because as you start to see the truth about people and yourself, then no, you're not at the effect of this world anymore, because you're starting to wake up from this world. So while we're locked in this world, yeah, we have to play by the rules of this world. And part of that is accountability. Part of that is following certain guidelines of behavior. And then if people fall out of those guidelines of behavior, having to deal with the consequences. Absolutely. But that doesn't have anything to do with what happens in your heart. That doesn't have anything to do with what we hold in our heart towards ourselves or another person. Because whatever you're doing or thinking about somebody else, you're doing and thinking to yourself. And that's just how it is. There's no way around it. No matter how much you try to justify that and try to say, no, that can't be the case, it's still the case that you and others are not separate, and that anything you do to another, it's not going to necessarily just come back on you. You're doing it to you. You're doing it to you. I really do appreciate that question, because it's a very, very important question, and it's one that can be very challenging to even contemplate, let alone answer. But you are correct. The ego can take any concept and use it for its own nefarious purposes. So yes, when the ego takes these ideas, it says, oh, hot damn, we can go out and do whatever we want to do and there's no accountability. And that's not at all what we're saying. What we are saying is that when people are under the influence of that diseased mind and they act inappropriately, if we can see them as sick people trying to get their needs met, it's much easier for us to have a compassion toward them, even while we are taking out that restraining order, or even when we are filing that police report, or even when we are testifying against them in court. The same goes for us. When we start to have compassion for other people, then we actually have compassion for ourselves. And getting rid of guilt is not what we're after. Because the only way to get rid of guilt is, from the ego's point of view, is to project it onto another. So it's not that we're trying to get rid of guilt. We're trying to recognize the fact that guilt ultimately isn't real, because ultimately everybody is innocent. Ultimately, everybody's at worst diseased. But in reality, there is no disease. In reality, there is no guilt. In reality, there is no problem. While we're in this world, yeah, we're dealing with these problems. We're dealing with bad behavior. But we can start to have an eye from the other world. Even while we're in this world, we can start gently awakening to the truth by finding compassion for those who are abusive, for those who are problematic with their behavior, and for ourselves when we have those tendencies, by understanding where that's coming from. It's coming from moments of pain, moments of disease, not from pure evil, even though it looks like it sometimes, because God did not create evil. God only created you out of love. And so anything that looks like evil, either from your behavior or from another's behavior, is simply disease. And that doesn't mean that we have to be victimized by it. It doesn't mean that we don't create boundaries. It doesn't mean we don't say no. In fact, sometimes the most loving thing to say is no. Oftentimes the most loving thing to tell somebody is no. You can't do that to me. Sometimes we have to be very firm with people. But there's a difference between that and condemning them and hating them and wanting to attack them because of what they've done. Because what that does, like we said, is perpetuate the guilt-blame cycle, the guilt-punishment cycle. And then that comes back on us, and then we project it out, then it comes back on us, and then we project it out, and it goes on for eternity. Claiming your innocence and claiming the innocence of another is a very, very powerful thing to do. And no, that doesn't mean that there is no accountability in this world. In fact, sometimes the faster you find that forgiveness and innocence, the faster that accountability seems to take place in this world. Because then once you're accountable for something in this world, you can get it over with. You can move past it. It's part of the forgiveness process, is making amends, isn't it? Part of the forgiveness process is taking accountability for actions and making amends for it. Innocence is your natural state, even though you sometimes don't act like it. And that can be very challenging to see, but it's exactly what we are called upon to do, especially when we're doing work like this. Thank you so much for spending a little time with me today. I so appreciate you. Until next time, blessed be.